An immigrant barista's kindness to a lonely veteran unveils a shocking family secret that neither could have imagined when Elena first noticed the weathered man who visited her cafe every Tuesday morning at precisely 9 o'clock. The routine never varied. He would enter with military punctuality, the bell above the door announcing his arrival with a cheerful jingle that contrasted sharply with his solemn demeanor. His shoulders, once squared with pride, now curved inward like parentheses around a life story too painful to share. The man, in his late 60s with silver hair cropped close to his scalp, would order the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, no cream, no conversation beyond what was necessary. Elena called him Tuesday Man. In her mind, after 3 months of serving him, she knew nothing about him except that his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his cup, and that his eyes, a faded blue like denim washed too many times, never quite met hers. "1 regular black coffee?" she would say, her accent wrapping around the words like a gentle embrace. He would nod, pay with exact change, and retreat to the same corner table by the window, where he would stare out at the street for exactly 47 minutes before leaving an empty cup and a small, precisely folded napkin behind. Elena understood isolation. It had been her constant companion since arriving in America 4 years ago from Ukraine. At 32, she had crossed an ocean with nothing but a suitcase of clothes, a handful of family photographs, and her grandmother's recipes tucked into the lining of her coat. The cafe job had been a lifeline, though the owner, Mrs. Patterson, paid her less than the other employees because Elena's work visa situation was complicated. This particular Tuesday in late October brought with it a biting chill that hinted at an early winter. Rain pelted the cafe windows, transforming the street outside into a bleary watercolor of umbrellas and hunched shoulders. Elena arrived at work with her dark hair damp against her neck, her fingers stiff with cold despite the gloves she'd knitted herself during the long, lonely evenings in her studio apartment. "Morning, Elena," called Darcy, the college student who worked mornings before her afternoon classes. "The heater's acting up again, Mrs. Patterson says she'll call someone, but you know how that goes." Elena nodded, unwinding her scarf. "I bring extra sweater today," she said, gesturing to her bag. "Winter comes early this year, I think." She moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency, her body falling into the familiar rhythm of opening procedures. The coffee beans needed grinding, the pastry case required stocking, the tables awaited wiping down. The work was monotonous but comforting in its predictability. Unlike the life she'd fled, these tasks followed rules she could understand. At precisely 3 minutes before 9, Elena found herself glancing repeatedly at the door. Tuesday Man was never late. Perhaps the weather had kept him away. The thought brought an unexpected pang of disappointment. The bell jingled at 9 o'clock sharp. There he was, more soaked than she'd expected, his navy jacket darkened by rain, his face glistening with droplets that caught in the creases around his eyes. Today, something was different. He moved more slowly, his left leg dragging slightly, and when he reached the counter, Elena noticed his hands were trembling more than usual. "Good morning," she said, already reaching for the cup. "Regular black coffee?" The man opened his mouth, then closed it, cleared his throat. "Yes," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Thank you." As she poured the coffee, Elena made a decision. She reached for one of the fresh cranberry muffins she'd baked that morning, an experiment with her grandmother's recipe that wasn't on the menu yet. She placed it on a plate and set it beside his coffee. "On the house," she explained when he looked confused. "Cold day needs warm food." The man stared at the muffin, then at Elena, as if trying to decode a foreign language. "Thank you," he said finally. "My grandmother's recipe," she added, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "From home, Ukraine." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of recognition perhaps, or memory. "Ukraine?" he repeated, his voice suddenly clearer. "I was there once." "Long time ago?" Elena felt a current of surprise run through her. It was the most he'd ever spoken to her. "You visit Ukraine? For vacation?" He shook his head, the movement sharp and military. "No." "Military deployment?" 1986. "Chernobyl?" she asked, the word carrying the weight of collective memory. His eyes met hers fully for the first time, and Elena was struck by the depth of sorrow they contained. "Yes, Chernobyl." A customer entered, shaking rain from an umbrella, breaking the moment. The man nodded, took his coffee and muffin, and retreated to his usual table. But something had shifted, a tiny crack in the wall between them. Elena watched him throughout her shift, noticing how he broke the muffin into small, precise pieces, eating each one slowly as if savoring a luxury. When he left that day, he nodded to her, a deliberate acknowledgement that made her heart catch in her throat. The following Tuesday arrived with clear skies but biting cold. The cafe was busier than usual, people seeking refuge from the plummeting temperatures. Elena worked quickly, her mind half distracted by the question of whether Tuesday man would mention Ukraine again. At 9 o'clock, the bell jingled. There he was, wearing the same navy jacket but with a scarf wrapped around his neck. As he approached the counter, Elena noticed he was carrying something, a small worn book with a faded cover. "Good morning," she said, already preparing his coffee. "Black coffee, yes?" "Yes, please." He placed his money on the counter, then hesitated. "These?" he said, setting the book beside the cash. "Photos. From Ukraine. Thought you might, if you're interested." Elena picked up the book, which she now realized was a small photo album. "You want I should look?" He nodded stiffly. "If you have time, I'll be at my table." The morning rush kept her busy for the next hour, but the photo album seemed to burn with potential energy beneath the counter. When the cafe finally emptied around 10:30, Elena poured herself a cup of tea and brought the album to his table. "May I sit?" she asked. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please." Elena opened the album carefully. The first photos showed young men in military uniforms standing beside massive helicopters. "You were pilot?" she asked. "Co-pilot. We flew radiation monitoring missions over the reactor after the explosion." His finger tapped one of the young men, and Elena realized with a jolt that it was him, younger, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that hadn't yet seen too much. "How long you stay in Ukraine?" 3 months. He turned the page. More photos of military operations and then, unexpectedly, pictures of a village. Small houses with peaked roofs, gardens, a church with an onion dome. "This is not Chernobyl," Elena said, recognizing the architectural style of Western Ukraine. "No. After our mission ended, a few of us traveled. Wanted to see the country." His voice softened. "Beautiful country." Elena turned the page and froze. There, in a faded color photograph, stood a young woman in front of a house she recognized intimately. The woman wore a blue dress with embroidery along the neckline, traditional Ukrainian vyshyvanka patterns that Elena knew by heart. "This house," she whispered. "Where is this?" He leaned forward to look. "Small village? Birch something? Berezne? Berezani? Berezhani?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, that's it." With trembling fingers, Elena pointed to the woman in the blue dress. "This woman, her name?" He frowned, searching his memory. "Sophia, I think. Or Sophia?" "The villagers were kind to us despite everything. She gave us food, showed us the local church." The world seemed to tilt beneath Elena. "This is my grandmother," she said, her voice barely audible. "This is her house." "Where I grow up?" The man stared at her, disbelief etched into every line of his weathered face. "That's not possible." Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly to her photo gallery, scrolling back to an old picture she'd digitized before leaving Ukraine. She placed the phone on the table beside the album. There was her grandmother, 30 years younger but unmistakably the same woman, standing in front of the same house, wearing the same blue dress. "My babusha," Elena said. "Sofia Kovalenko." The color drained from the man's face. He reached for his coffee with a hand that trembled violently now, knocking the cup over. Coffee spread across the table, seeping into the edges of the photo album. Elena jumped up, grabbing napkins to blot the spill, but the man didn't move. He sat frozen, eyes fixed on Elena's face as if seeing it for the first time. "Your grandmother?" he whispered. "Sophia." Elena nodded, confused by his reaction. "Yes. Did you know her well?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet and extracted a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. With great care, he unfolded it and smoothed it on the dry part of the table. It was a letter, written in Ukrainian. Elena recognized her grandmother's handwriting immediately. "You read Ukrainian?" she asked, bewildered. He shook his head. "Never could. Never knew what it said." "Then why?" "She gave it to me before I left. Said to keep it, that maybe someday I'd find someone to translate it." His voice had become so quiet Elena had to lean forward to hear. "For 36 years I've carried it." Elena picked up the letter, her grandmother's familiar script sending a wave of homesickness through her. "You want I should read?" she asked. He nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. Elena began to read aloud, translating as she went. "My dearest William," she started, then paused, looking up. "Your name is William?" "Bill," he corrected. "William on my birth certificate." She continued, "By the time you read this, you will be back in America, far from our small village, and perhaps far from the memory of these few weeks we shared. I do not expect you to remember the girl from Ukraine who showed you her church and taught you to make borscht, but I will remember you, because you have left me with something I cannot forget." Elena's voice faltered as she read the next lines. Her hands began to tremble so badly that the letter shook. "I am carrying your child. By my calculation, the baby will come in spring. I do not tell you this to burden you or to ask for anything. You have your life in America, your military career, perhaps even a family waiting. I write this only so that somewhere in the world these words exist. My child will know love, even with only one parent. Perhaps someday, if fate is kind, this letter will find its way to you, and you will know that in Ukraine, you have family." The cafe around them had faded away. Elena could hear nothing but the thundering of her own heartbeat and the ragged breathing of the man across from her. "There's more," she whispered, forcing herself to continue. "I have decided that if it is a girl, I will name her Lydia, after my mother. If you ever wish to know your child, you need only come back to Berezhany and ask for Sofia Kovalenko. I will not hold you to promises never made, but I will leave a light burning just in case. With love that crosses oceans, Sofia." The letter slipped from Elena's fingers. "Lydia," Bill whispered. "Is that my mother?" Elena said, her voice breaking. "Lydia Kovalenko. She died when I was 16. Bill's face crumpled, decades of emotion breaking through the military stoicism. "I never knew," he said, his voice raw. "I never knew." Elena felt as though she were standing outside her body, watching the scene unfold. This man, this Tuesday man who had ordered black coffee for months without ever meeting her eyes, was her grandfather, her mother's father, a part of her family she never knew existed. "Why you never read letter before?" she asked, trying to make sense of the 36-year gap. Bill wiped roughly at his eyes. "I tried. Over the years, I tried to find translators, but it was the Cold War. People were suspicious. Then life happened. I got married, had responsibilities. My wife died 10 years ago. After that," he gestured vaguely, "nothing seemed to matter much. But you keep letter all this time. Couldn't throw it away. Didn't know why." He looked up at her, really looked at her, and Elena saw her mother's eyes staring back at her. "You have her eyes." Sophia's eyes. A customer approached the counter, clearing his throat impatiently. Elena barely heard him. "Mrs. Patterson emerged from the back, frowning at Elena sitting with a customer. "Elena, there's a line forming," she called sharply. I need moment," Elena replied, unable to tear herself away. "You need to do your job." "Mrs. Patterson responded, her voice rising. "Personal conversations can wait until your break." Bill straightened in his chair, military bearing returning. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Mrs. Patterson. "I apologize for the interruption, but we've just discovered that Elena is my granddaughter. I'd appreciate a few minutes of your understanding." Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open. "Your what?" "Granddaughter," Bill repeated firmly. "Family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Elena had been alone for so long, had crossed an ocean to escape war, only to find herself adrift in a country where she had no one. And now, here was this man, her grandfather, who had been sitting across from her every Tuesday, both of them lonely, both of them missing pieces of themselves. Mrs. Patterson looked between them, noted the spilled coffee, the photos, the tears on both their faces. "Take 15 minutes, she said finally. "Darcy can cover." When she walked away, silence fell between Elena and Bill. There was too much to say, too many years to bridge in 15 minutes. "I live 2 blocks from here," Bill said finally. "Small apartment, nothing fancy. But if you'd like to come for dinner sometime, to talk." Elena felt tears spill over. "I would like very much. I don't know how to cook Ukrainian food," he added, a hint of apology in his voice. "I teach you," Elena said, a smile breaking through her tears. "My grandmother's recipes. I have them all." Bill nodded, and Elena saw the military precision in the gesture soften, saw him struggling to find words big enough for this moment. "I'm working tomorrow night," Elena said, filling the silence. "But Thursday? I can come Thursday. Thursday at 6. he confirmed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, slightly bent at the corners. My address and phone number. Elena took it carefully, as if it might dissolve between her fingers. William Hayes. She read aloud, testing the name of her newfound family. Elena Kovalenko, he echoed. My granddaughter. The 15 minutes Mrs. Patterson had granted were nearly up. Elena stood reluctantly, tucking the card into her pocket. I must work now, she said. But Thursday we talk more. Bill nodded, gathering his photo album and the letter. I'll bring more photos of my time in Ukraine. And after. If you want to see, I want, Elena assured him. She hesitated, then impulsively leaned down and kissed his weathered cheek. Until Thursday, Dedushka. His eyes widened at the Russian word for grandfather. What does that mean? It means you are not alone anymore, Elena said, and neither am I. As she returned to her place behind the counter, Elena felt the weight of solitude lifting from her shoulders. Outside, the late October wind still blew cold, but inside, a warmth had kindled that no winter could touch. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. The next 2 days passed in a blur for Elena. She moved through her shifts mechanically, making lattes and serving pastries while her mind whirled with questions. What had her mother known about her American father? Had her grandmother kept the secret all those years? Was there more family in America she didn't know about? By Thursday afternoon, Elena had cleaned her apartment 3 times, changed her outfit twice, and baked pampushki, Ukrainian garlic bread rolls, using her grandmother's recipe. As she wrapped them in a kitchen towel to keep them warm, she paused, overcome by the strange twist of fate that had brought her grandfather's letter full circle after all these years. Bill's apartment building was older than she expected, a brick structure with fire escapes zigzagging down its facade like metal stitches holding it together. She checked the address on his card one more time before pressing the buzzer for apartment 4B. His voice crackled through the intercom. Elena? Yes, it's me, she confirmed. The door buzzed, unlocking, and Elena stepped into a dimly lit foyer. The elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to it, so she took the stairs, climbing slowly, her heart pounding more from anticipation than exertion. When she reached the 4th floor, Bill was waiting in his doorway. He'd traded his navy jacket for a button-down shirt in a faded blue that brought out his eyes. Her mother's eyes. He looked uncertain, almost shy, a sharp contrast to his military bearing. You found it okay? He asked, stepping aside to let her in. Yes, no problem. Elena entered, taking in the small, neat apartment. Everything was organized with military precision, books aligned perfectly on shelves, cushions positioned at exact angles on the sofa, a folded American flag in a triangular display case. I made traditional bread, she said, offering the wrapped bundle. Pampushki. Pampushki, he repeated carefully, taking the bundle. Thank you. It smells wonderful. He led her to a small dining table already set for 2, with what looked like new plates and cloth napkins. A pot of something simmered on the stove. I tried to make borscht, he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. Found a recipe online? Probably not like your grandmother's. Elena felt a lump form in her throat. You make borscht for me? He nodded. Thought it might be appropriate, given everything. She moved to the stove and lifted the lid. The deep red soup didn't look exactly like her grandmother's. The consistency was a bit too thin, and she could tell he'd used canned beets rather than fresh, but the gesture itself was enough to make her eyes sting with tears. It looks good, she assured him. Let me just... She reached for the salt, added a pinch, then some dill from a small bunch sitting on the counter. There. Now it's perfect. They sat at the table, an awkward silence settling between them as Bill ladled soup into their bowls. Elena broke off a piece of pampushki and handed it to him. In Ukraine, we dip in soup, she explained. Try. He followed her example, dipping the bread and taking a bite. His eyes widened slightly. That's delicious. My grandmother's recipe, Elena said. She teach my mother teach me. At the mention of her mother, Bill's expression grew somber. Lydia, he said softly. You said she passed away when you were 16? Elena nodded, stirring her soup. Cancer. Very quick. 2 months from diagnosis to end. I'm sorry, Bill said, his voice rough with emotion. I would have liked to meet her. She was strong, Elena said. Funny too. Always making jokes, even when things were hard. She was teacher, English and literature. Is that how you learned English so well? Elena smiled slightly. Yes. She insists I learn? Said English is key to whole world. After she die, I live with my grandmother until I finish university. Then when war came to eastern Ukraine, we decide I should leave. Babusha too old to travel, she said. She stay behind. Bill leaned forward, his soup forgotten. Is she still? Elena shook her head, the familiar grief washing over her. No, she died last year. Heart attack. She swallowed hard. I could not go back for funeral. Too dangerous. Bill reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. I'm sorry, Elena. So much loss for someone so young. She turned her hand to grip his, this newfound connection both strange and comforting. Now I find you, she said simply. They ate in silence for a few moments, both processing the enormity of their discovery. You have questions, Bill said finally, about what happened in Ukraine. With your grandmother. Elena nodded. Many questions. He set down his spoon, took a deep breath. I was 24, part of a military response team sent after the Chernobyl disaster. We flew radiation monitoring missions, dropping sensors, tracking the spread of contamination. His eyes grew distant. Afterward, a few of us were given leave before returning to base in Germany. We decided to see some of the country. And you meet my grandmother in Berezhany. Yes. Our jeep broke down outside the village. She was the first person we met, working in her garden when we walked into town looking for help. A smile touched his lips. She didn't speak English and none of us spoke Ukrainian, but somehow she understood. Got the local mechanic to help us, insisted we stay for a meal while we waited. Elena could picture it clearly. Her grandmother, always generous, always ready to feed hungry travelers. She never turned away someone who needs help. I ended up staying 3 weeks in that village. Bill continued. My buddies went on after the jeep was fixed, but I couldn't leave. Every day I'd tell myself tomorrow I'd go, and every day I'd find a reason to stay. Sophia, Elena said, using her grandmother's name. She was the reason. He nodded, his eyes softening with memory. She taught me to make borscht, took me mushroom hunting in the forest, showed me the old church with its painted walls. We couldn't really talk to each other, not with words, but somehow... He trailed off, lost in the past. You fall in love, Elena finished for him. Yes, he admitted, his voice barely audible. It was fast and impossible, and I knew I had to leave, had orders to return. But those weeks? He shook his head. Nothing in my life has ever felt more real. Why you never go back? After you get letter? Bill's face darkened. I never read the letter, Elena. Not until you translated it. I tried to find someone who could read Ukrainian, but it was complicated. This was during the Cold War. Then I got reassigned to a base in California. Met Caroline, my late wife. Life moved on. He looked down at his hands. By the time I had the resources and freedom to travel back to Ukraine, almost 10 years had passed. I figured Sophia had moved on too. Maybe married. I told myself it would be selfish to disrupt her life. But you keep letter. I kept the letter, he confirmed. Something wouldn't let me throw it away. Like a thread connecting me to that time, to her. He looked up, his eyes pained. If I'd known about Lydia. I swear to you, Elena, if I'd known I had a daughter, nothing would have kept me from finding her. Elena believed him. The regret in his eyes was too raw, too genuine to doubt. It's not your fault, she said gently. Babusha make choice not to ask you to come back. She was proud woman. Tell me about her, Bill said. After I left. Was she happy? Elena thought carefully before answering, sorting through family stories and her own memories. She never married. Raised my mother alone, working as seamstress, then opening small shop for traditional Ukrainian embroidery. Very respected in village. She smiled at a memory. When I was child, women would come from other villages to ask her to embroider wedding dresses, special occasion clothes. She had magic in her fingers, they say. She never told Lydia about me? I don't know, Elena admitted. My mother never speak of her father. I assume she did not know who he was. Or perhaps she knew but respected Babusha's silence. She hesitated. In Ukraine, especially in small villages, unmarried mother was a difficult thing in those times. People can be judgmental. Bill winced. She faced that alone because of me. No, Elena said firmly. She faced that by her choice. She say in letter, she not expect anything from you. They finished their meal, moved to the small living room where Bill had prepared coffee. As Elena settled onto the sofa, he brought out several photo albums and a wooden box. After you left the cafe Tuesday, I started digging through my storage closet, he explained, sitting beside her. Found more photos from Ukraine. And these. He opened the box, revealing a collection of small items. A pressed flower, A wooden figurine of a bird, a colorful woven bracelet, a small painted egg. Pisanka, Elena exclaimed, picking up the egg. Ukrainian Easter egg. My grandmother made these every spring. She gave me that one, Bill said it represented new beginnings. They spent the next several hours poring over photos and memories, piecing together the puzzle of their shared history. Bill showed her pictures of his military service, his late wife Caroline, the house they'd owned in California before downsizing after her death. Elena shared the few photographs she'd managed to bring from Ukraine. Her mother's university graduation, her own childhood, her grandmother in her shop surrounded by colorful embroidery. You look like her, Bill observed, studying a picture of a teenaged Elena beside her grandmother. Something in the cheekbones, the way you hold your head. My mother always say same thing, Elena replied, touching the photograph gently. As the evening grew late, a comfortable silence fell between them, the initial awkwardness dissolved by shared stories and discovered connections. I should go, Elena said finally, noticing the clock showing nearly midnight. I have early shift tomorrow. Bill nodded but seemed reluctant to end their evening. As he walked her to the door, he hesitated, then asked, Would you like to come for Thanksgiving? It's in 3 weeks. I usually go to the Veterans Center, but we could have dinner here. Just us. Elena felt a surge of warmth. I would like that very much. Good, he said, relief evident in his voice. That's good. At the door, they faced each other awkwardly, neither quite sure how to say goodbye. Then, with military decisiveness, Bill opened his arms. Elena stepped into them, feeling the strength still present in his thin frame as he embraced her. Granddaughter, he whispered, the word filled with wonder. I have a granddaughter. Elena held him tightly, breathing in the scent of coffee and aftershave, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. And I have family in America now, she replied. I am not alone anymore. As she walked home through the quiet streets, Elena felt as though the city had transformed around her. The same buildings stood in the same places, the same stars shone overhead, but everything felt different. The crushing weight of solitude had lifted, replaced by a fragile, newborn sense of belonging. For the first time since leaving Ukraine, America felt like it might someday be home. The following Tuesday, Elena arrived at work to find a surprise waiting for her. Bill was already at the cafe, but instead of sitting at his usual corner table, he was standing at the counter, engaged in serious conversation with Mrs. Patterson. Elena, Mrs. Patterson called when she spotted her. Just the person we need. Elena approached cautiously, glancing between her boss and her grandfather. Good morning. Is something wrong? Not at all, Mrs. Patterson said with uncharacteristic cheerfulness. Mr. Hayes was just telling me about your situation. Why didn't you tell me you were having visa issues? Elena froze, panic fluttering in her chest. Her work visa was indeed complicated. It had expired 3 months ago, and the renewal process had been stalled by bureaucratic delays and her inability to afford proper legal help. I didn't want to cause problems, she stammered. Bill gave her a reassuring nod. I've explained to Mrs. Patterson that we're working on resolving your immigration status. My friend Robert is an immigration attorney. He's agreed to take your case. Pro bono, Mrs. Patterson added, looking impressed. And Mr. Hayes has assured me that your situation will be regularized very soon. Elena stared at Bill, speechless. He hadn't mentioned any of this during their dinner. I hope you don't mind, he said quietly. I made some calls yesterday. Robert believes we have a strong case for family reunification, given the circumstances. Family reunification? Elena repeated, the words unfamiliar on her tongue. Mrs. Patterson beamed at them both. I had no idea you were related to a war hero, Elena. Mr. Hayes was telling me about his service. Very impressive. I'm not a hero, ma'am, Bill corrected gently. Just did my duty. Well, I'm happy to know Elena has family looking out for her, Mrs. Patterson said. And of course, now that I understand the situation, we can discuss adjusting your hours to accommodate any immigration appointments you might need to attend. With that, she disappeared into the back office, leaving Elena and Bill alone at the counter. You didn't have to do this, Elena whispered, overwhelmed. Yes, I did, Bill replied simply. You're my family, Elena. My responsibility now. But the lawyer, the cost... Robert owes me a favor from way back, Bill assured her. And I have savings. Not much use for money at my age living alone. He paused, seeming to search for the right words. When Caroline died, I thought that was it for me. No children, no family left. I've been existing, not living. Then you read that letter and suddenly I have a purpose again. Elena felt tears threatening. Thank you, she managed. Bill cleared his throat, clearly emotional himself. Now about that coffee. Black, please. And maybe one of those muffins you mentioned last time? Elena laughed through her tears, grateful for his shift to lighter ground. Coming right up, Dadushka. As the weeks passed, Elena and Bill settled into a new routine. He still came to the cafe every Tuesday at 9, but now she took her break to sit with him. On Thursdays, she went to his apartment for dinner. Sometimes they cooked together, Elena teaching him Ukrainian recipes, Bill showing her American comfort foods. Other evenings, they spread documentation across his dining table, working through the intricate paperwork of immigration law. True to Bill's word, his friend Robert was handling Elena's case with genuine interest and surprising speed. It's not often I get a case with this kind of human interest, he'd explained during their first meeting. Honestly, it's a welcome change from corporate visas. November brought colder weather and Thanksgiving preparations. Elena had never celebrated the American holiday, but she embraced the concept enthusiastically, researching traditional dishes online and planning ways to incorporate Ukrainian elements into their meal. The day before Thanksgiving, she arrived at Bill's apartment with bags of groceries, determined to create a feast that honored both their heritages. He opened the door with an unusually bright expression. Perfect timing, he said, ushering her in. Robert just called with news. Elena set down the bags, her heart racing. About my visa? Bill nodded, his eyes crinkling with happiness. Your case has been approved for expedited processing. Because of your status as the granddaughter of a U.S. veteran with service-related disabilities, they're fast-tracking everything. Disabilities? Elena asked, confused. Bill gestured to his left leg. The limp. Radiation exposure at Chernobyl did some damage over the years. Nothing serious, but it's documented in my military records. Elena hadn't realized the extent of his sacrifice during those missions over the damaged reactor. Another piece of their shared history clicked into place. How long? She asked, hardly daring to hope. Robert says 3 months, maybe 4. By spring, you should have permanent residency. Bill smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face. You won't have to be afraid anymore, Elena. This will be your home, too. Spring, the season her mother had been born. The season of new beginnings, just like the Pasanka egg her grandmother had given Bill all those years ago. Elena crossed the room and hugged him fiercely. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for coming to cafe every Tuesday. Best coffee in town, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. And as it turns out, the best family too. They spent the evening cooking, Elena teaching Bill how to make vareniki, Ukrainian dumplings, to serve alongside the turkey he'd purchased. As they worked side by side in the small kitchen, Elena felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that had eluded her since leaving Ukraine. Tomorrow, Bill said as they shaped the dumplings, I'd like to make a toast to Sophia and to Lydia, to honor them. I would like that, Elena agreed softly. They would be happy, I think, to see us together. Do you think, Bill began, then paused. Do you think Sophia ever regretted not telling me about Lydia? Elena considered this carefully. I don't know, but I think she must have loved you very much to keep your letter all those years, to make sure I learned English so well. She smiled at a sudden realization. Perhaps she was preparing me all along in her way. For America. For finding you someday. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Bill said. Yes, Elena agreed. Like the women in our family tend to be. Bill laughed, a warm sound that filled the kitchen. I'm beginning to see that. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold. Elena woke early, watching the sunrise paint her small apartment in shades of gold and pink. For the first time since arriving in America, the day ahead held genuine celebration rather than lonely pretense. She dressed carefully in a blouse embroidered with traditional Ukrainian patterns, one of the few treasures she'd brought from home, and headed to Bill's apartment, carrying her contributions to their feast. When he opened the door, she was startled to see him in a formal military uniform, complete with medals and ribbons across his chest. Too much? He asked, noticing her surprise. I don't wear it often, but it felt appropriate today, to honor the path that led us here. It's perfect, Elena assured him, suddenly understanding how much this day meant to him as well. Inside, the apartment had been transformed. The small dining table was set with what she recognized as Bill's best dishes, candles waiting to be lit, and in the center, a framed photograph of Sophia from his album, placed beside one of Lydia that Elena had given him. Our guests of honor, he explained, following her gaze. Their meal was a beautiful fusion of traditions: roast turkey alongside vareniki, cranberry sauce and Ukrainian beet salad, pumpkin pie and pampushki. Before they ate, Bill poured wine into 2 glasses and raised his in a toast. "To Sophia," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "who gave me the greatest gift I never knew I had. And to Lydia, my daughter, who I wish I could have known. And to you, Elena, for bringing our family full circle." Elena raised her glass, adding softly, "To unexpected beginnings and the kindness of fate that brought an immigrant barista and a lonely veteran together." As they ate, sharing stories and creating new memories, Elena felt the presence of the women who had come before her: her grandmother who had loved an American soldier, her mother who had grown up without knowing her father. There was sadness in their story, yes, but also profound beauty in the way love had persisted across decades and continents to bring her and Bill together at exactly the right moment. "What are you thinking?" Bill asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking that some secrets are meant to be discovered," Elena replied. "And some coffees are meant to be served with muffins on rainy days." Bill laughed, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I'm grateful for your kindness that day, for seeing something worth connecting with in a grumpy old man." "Not so grumpy," Elena teased. "Just lonely. Like me." "Not anymore," he said, the simple words carrying the weight of a promise. "Not anymore," she agreed. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, dusting the world in a clean white blanket. Inside, grandfather and granddaughter continued their meal, their unexpected family gathering warm with new traditions and old memories, binding the present to the past and opening the door to a future neither could have imagined when Elena first noticed the weathered man who visited her cafe every Tuesday morning at precisely 9 o'clock.